Hello and good morning. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're thrilled to be joined by so many attendees from all 10 New York State regions. Today's webinar marks the official kickoff for our FY 2022 webinar week. If you have not done so already, please make sure you check out our FY 2022 webinar page for more information and registration links for this week's upcoming webinars and virtual office hours. My name is Megan White, and I'm Deputy Director of Programs for the New York State Council on the Arts. Today's webinar will be an overview of our FY 2022 Round 3 Special Opportunities grants. We'll cover such topics as eligibility, key dates, and pre-qualification. Many thanks to those of you who submitted questions in advance. We will have a dedicated Q&A session following this presentation, and you can still submit questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom. We encourage you to listen to the entire presentation before submitting your questions. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the NYSCA website, along with the presentation deck. We will share that link with you when everything is live. I am now pleased to introduce NYSCA staff members, Deborah Lim and Cavi Barnes, who will take us through the opportunity. Welcome, Debbie and Cavi.
Greetings.
Greetings, good morning and welcome. Today we will discuss Round 3, Support for Special Opportunities. I'm Cavi Barnes, Program Officer, and I'm joined today by Deborah Lim, Program Officer. Today we will go over the basics of these opportunities and some contact information for staff who can help you with any technical questions that you might have about applying. The FY22 Guidelines and Application Manual can be found on the FY22 Opportunities page on the NYSCA website under Funding Opportunities. The FY22 Special Opportunities we will discuss today are Folk and Traditional Arts Apprenticeships, Rehearsal and Studio Space for Performing Arts, and Performing Arts Residencies. Applications will be evaluated according to 4 criteria, and those are creativity, access, relevance, and managerial and fiscal. For questions, please contact program staff in the discipline area most aligned with your artistic work. View contact information by going to arts.ny.gov and clicking on About, then Contact Staff. The application portal opens for Round 3 on July 19th and closes on September 1st at 4 p.m. You must be pre-qualified in the New York State Grants Gateway portal at the deadline in order to be eligible for funding for fiscal year 22. More information on pre-qualification can be found on Section 8 of the NYSCA Application Manual. Folk arts are traditionally transmitted from elders to younger generations in the same distinctive ethnic, regional, occupational, or religious community. Where the chain of transmission is no longer as strong as it once was, apprenticeships can stimulate the continuity of these traditional arts. Folk and traditional arts apprenticeships provide individuals experienced in a folk art with opportunities to study with master folk artists from their own community. Priority is given to apprenticeships involving the transmission of traditions no longer widely practiced. Both the master and the apprentice are expected to develop a study plan, including a series of lessons and the skills to be mastered. The support awarded can now go to compensating both master and apprentice. Awards will be made up to $10,000. This is an increase from the previously awarded amount of up to $5,000. One all-encompassing criteria will be used to assess these applications: creativity. Any application scoring 2 or below will not be eligible for support. This criteria entails showing innovation and/or distinctiveness in the curriculum. The master artist must show a high degree of skill in a specified art form. Apprentices must have the appropriate skill level for the proposed curriculum. They must provide opportunities to learn a traditional art form for a member or members of the community from which the tradition originates. They must preserve a traditional art form to ensure its continuation for future generations. Compensation for artists and apprentices is appropriate for the time commitment. Cost proposed for any other materials is appropriate and feasible. And the curriculum must be appropriately structured and feasible as stated goals are achievable. And stated goals must be achievable. Thank you. Your application will be assessed on a scale of 5 to 0, guided by this scoring guide. 5 means that it meets or exceeds all benchmarks. 4 means that it meets most benchmarks. 3 means that it meets some benchmarks. 2 means that it meets few benchmarks. And 1 means that it does not meet any benchmarks. If the application scored at a 0, it means that questions were left unanswered and the activities are not associated with arts and culture. The response provides insufficient detail to understand the programming. I'm going to pass it over now to my colleague, Deborah Lim, to describe rehearsal and studio space opportunities.
Hello, my name is Deborah Lim, and I'm the Program Officer in Dance and Theater. I'm here to talk about 2 special opportunities geared towards the performing arts. These opportunities are available for direct applicant, not sponsored request. The first is rehearsal and studio space for performing arts. The purpose of this initiative is to provide affordable rehearsal and studio space for the performing arts field. It can be targeted towards one discipline or multiple disciplines. This can be addressed in your proposal and in the ways that your facility is suitable and appropriate for those performing art forms. Subsidized hours are for creative and rehearsal time only. The applicant organization cannot include their own hours within this program. So for prerequisites, a minimum of 1,000 hours must be utilized, not just offered, but actually utilized for the contract period at a rate of $10 per rehearsal hour or less. And no single artistic entity may exceed more than 10% of the subsidized hours. The idea here is to ensure that as many artists as possible have access to the NYSCA subsidized hours. For the rubric, you'll see that there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to refer you to the guidelines so you can read these more at your leisure. But please make sure that you take a chance to look at those when you're going to be addressing your questions. And when we go to the next slide, you'll see that this is the same approach to scoring across all NYSCA opportunities. It's the same as the ones that were mentioned by Kathy. All right, our second opportunity for the performing arts is for performing arts residencies. And this will allow support for artist fees and some administrative costs for a minimum 3-week residency by a New York State-based performing arts group in a targeted area outside New York City. The residency must be of consecutive weeks and take place in a location in New York State that is outside of the applicant's home county, and this residency must include a public-facing component. Goals for our residencies include developing audiences for the art form outside New York City, encouraging the cultural resources of community through in-depth interaction and collaboration with community and professional groups and/or individuals in the area. And it will support a New York-based performing arts entity with a substantial period of work during which it should conduct outreach programs such as classes, workshops, open rehearsals, community programs, creation of new work, and then the presentation of public performances. This is an opportunity to establish a sustained relationship between the arts group and the local community. Finally, priority will be given to residency projects that bring underrepresented art forms into a community and region. You should note that the performing arts group should stay in residence throughout and not commute back and forth. We really want the artists to become part of the community and maintain a presence. So for prerequisites, to be eligible to apply, an applicant organization must meet the following minimum criteria: be a nonprofit performing arts group with a recent history of NYSCA support. The definition for the latter is to have received a direct NYSCA grant within the past 5 years, so sometime between FY17 and FY21. If you need to find this information out, go to the NYSCA website. Under the grants heading, you'll find NYSCA Grant Search. And when you select that, you can fill in your organizational legal name and all the information will come up. So continuing with our prerequisites, you must indicate a confirmed residency host and location in your application, previous experience in conducting residency activity and programming, and to possess the administrative resources to conduct a residency for a minimum of 3 weeks. Again, this is quite in depth, so I'm going to refer you again to read this on the guidelines. This is the same approach to scoring that we have shown in the other 2 opportunities. So it's the same as what Kavi read out to you. I should say that for both rehearsal and studio space and residency opportunities, there are 4 overarching criteria that will be considered in the evaluation process. Each will be given a rating from 5 to 0. The application will receive an overall score which averages all 4 criteria. However, any application scoring 2 and below in any criterion will not be eligible for support. And as an overall comment, please be sure to address the application questions within your proposal and to submit all required support materials. So we have some frequently asked questions that we can talk about. And the first is, I have a multi-year grant with NYSCA. Can I still apply? Yes, these 3 opportunities are exempt funding opportunities. Another question, I plan on applying for FY2022 support for organizations or artists. Can I still apply? Yes, these are exempt funding opportunities. I'm a new applicant. Can I apply? You can apply for folk and traditional art apprenticeships and the rehearsal and studio space performing arts, but you are not eligible to apply for performing arts residencies as a first-time applicant. So another question, I'm a museum that has a performance series. We meet the requirements to apply for the Performing Arts Residencies grant. Am I eligible? No, your museum can host a group that will apply for NYSCA support, but you cannot apply for a Performing Arts Residencies grant. The Performing Arts group can apply for this grant if they are from outside your county. My advice for the museum would be to include all kinds of programming, such as I host residencies at my location, within your own support for organizations proposal. Another question, I am eligible for residency. Oops, sorry. I am eligible for residency if I'm a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary arts group. As long as you have artists involved in the community activities and the performance presentation of the work, you can apply. Here's information on who to contact. For technical questions on submitting online applications for pre-qualification, contact our help desk at help@arts.ny.gov. For opportunity-related questions, please contact program staff in the discipline area most aligned with your organization's work. And you can find the information for who to contact at that link on the slide. Submit questions at least 2 weeks before the application deadline. Please note that we do not review written draft application materials.
And here's a list of some upcoming webinars and support. This kicks off the first of the webinar series for the week. But please, you can always return to this recording through our website. And we encourage you to read really all the guidelines for the relevant opportunity ahead of the webinar so that you can ask all the relevant questions that you have, and you can make sure to get those questions answered at the time of Q&A. We're actually rolling into Q&A right now. We have a couple of questions already submitted in the chat. Regarding, let's see, in previous years, there was an expectation that the master and apprentice, and this is regarding the folk arts opportunity, would do a public program upon completion of the apprenticeship. That no longer appears to be in the guidelines. Is it still an expectation? So all of the applicants should keep in mind that this, as well as all of our opportunities, are public opportunities. And so it is a priority for NYSCA to have your works be for the public benefit. And so that's always a consideration. And so yes, we would like to see that public presentation component if it applies to your apprenticeship. Second question is, it's a long question, so bear with me. Is it okay to submit a budget that allocates 90 to 100% of the grant to the master artist? I know that the increase from 4,000 to 10,000 was made in part to enable compensating apprentices for their time. This is an important consideration, especially for working people later in life seeking an apprenticeship. But if a master artist were to work with 2 high school aged people, for example, could a master artist still receive the bulk of the award? Or is the expectation that apprentices are also to be paid at this point? Should the request be lower if apprentices are not being paid? Okay, so that's an interesting question. We don't necessarily dictate how an applicant breaks down their funds in their application. The inclusion of our compensation for the inclusion of compensation for apprentices with an increased cap on the award is aiming to address issues of equity, in which some people might not be able to participate if they would have to donate their time to do so. It seems like in this person's particular situation, maybe that doesn't apply, right? If you can address those reasons in the breakdown of your budget and the narrative, then that would actually be acceptable. Each application will be evaluated by the panel as it's outlined in the criteria and against NYSCA's general priorities, and that's listed in the guidelines. So please take a look at the priorities that are listed right below the narrative questions, or right at the beginning of the narrative questions section in our guidelines, in our general guidelines. Okay, and there should be there are several more questions. We submit more than one folk arts apprenticeship application. And the answer to that is that groups can sponsor more than one apprenticeship, but a master artist cannot get multiple grants.
All right, I think the next question is for performing arts residencies. Someone is asking if they could send multiple artists over 3 weeks to an out-of-state residency. Why does it have to be 3 consecutive weeks? Well, first I should mention that we are the New York State Council on the Arts. We want to fund New York State artists and organizations, and we want them to do activities within New York State and to address a New York State audience. So that is meant to address the out-of-state question. About the 3 consecutive weeks. Well, there are a lot of different approaches to conducting residencies, and they're all very valid. But at NYSCA, we have decided that we really want to concentrate on a residency of 3 consecutive weeks so that the arts group that is visiting the community can actually build and sustain a presence over those 3 weeks and develop a momentum during this residency that is very important to establishing the connection with the community and having a better understanding of the art form being presented. So that's why we took this particular approach. And the next question about the residency opportunity, can a New York City-based organization apply for New York City-based artists? The host does not apply. It's the New York artists, and it could be New York State artists, it doesn't have to be New York City-based artists, it could be New York State-based artists who would be applying to NYSCA after developing a partnership and a connection with a host site in an upstate region outside of their own county. And hopefully, that would mean that the artists will be able to negotiate and work out an arrangement that financially can be viable for both. The New York City-based organization, again, is not eligible to apply. The upstate host is also, as I mentioned before, not eligible to apply. The upstate host should include any kind of programming of this type under their own Support for Organizations proposal. The next question deals with rental space program. How and where do we indicate that we are requesting multi-year support? You do not. The council will decide whether multi-year support is merited based on the evaluation of all the applications coming up in that category by the panelists. So the council will determine that. You do not have to indicate in there that you want it or you don't want it. The council will decide those things. If we have received sub-rental only for dance, can we now apply for sub-rental across performing arts disciplines? That's actually a very good question. Probably it's best to contact me if you've been getting support for dance rehearsal space, and then talk about how that could potentially be spread across more performing arts disciplines. If it's a similar number of hours that you're going to be doing that you had already been obligated under your multi-year grant, then probably we just have to have a chat about it so we know what's happening there. But if in fact you think you could offer more hours, we should talk, because generally speaking, I think we only want to have 1 rehearsal space request in per organization. The next question is for you, Cavi, about apprenticeship.
Right. So is there a limit for the number of apprenticeships grant applications that an organization can submit? No, I mean, I would say again that groups can sponsor more than 1 apprenticeship, but the master artist can only get 1 apprenticeship. They cannot get multiple. Okay. Would you please provide some examples of folk and traditional arts? And if there's a comprehensive list of such arts provided somewhere, such as in the aforementioned NYSCA application manual. I did read a little bit in the beginning. There was one slide that described what we mean by folk and traditional arts. I would refer to the guidelines. And if you don't get the answers that you're seeking there, I would actually refer you to Katie Steger, who's the interim director for the Folk Arts Program. And you can find her information on the NYSCA site if you go to the contacts page. And I'm going to throw it back.
Yes, the next one I think is asking a question about performing arts residency and what constitutes recent history of NYSCA funding. How many years back? As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you've been funded any time in the past 5 years, so any time between FY17 and FY21, you can apply for a performing arts residency. And that sort of matches up with our Restart New York guidelines as well. All right, the next question about performing arts residencies. A nonprofit in New York City without a recent history of NYSCA support is not eligible, correct? Correct. You're going to have to wait until you are funded at least once to be able to apply in that category. Okay. I think there was an earlier question. Someone said, we have a 2-year award. Are we still eligible? So I'm going to go back to that question, which we didn't get a chance to answer. If you have a multi-year award in, say, general operating support, you could still apply for any of these 3 special opportunities. However, if you already have a multi-year grant from the dance program to do subsidized rehearsal space, then you really shouldn't be applying in that category again. Again, we might have a discussion about that, as I mentioned. If you're planning to continue offering affordable rehearsal time to dance artists and you have your multi-year grant, you should keep that and not reapply. I guess the one wrinkle, and again, as I said, please talk to us for advice, is if you want to expand the kinds of art forms, performing art forms that you're going to be hosting as part of the rehearsal space program. So talk to program staff about that. All right, go ahead.
Well, someone had a general question about steps that they can take to apply to NYSCA. And I think it's important to repeat that if you go to arts.ny.gov, go to, let's see, actually just fiscal year 22 opportunities, and then go over to the NYSCA application manual. It's the first thing listed on that page. You'll receive instructions really on that first page on all the steps that you need to take to apply for a grant this year. Sorry, Debbie?
Yeah, the next one is about amounts. What amounts will the awards for rehearsal space grants be? And actually, in terms of both rehearsal and studio space, as well as the residency opportunities, it's being expanded to all performing arts this year and beyond just dance. So it really isn't possible to offer any grant levels at this time. I will mention that, as with most of our supported projects, the organization will need to locate other resources. I'll also give you some information from previous but recent grants in the dance program. So rehearsal space grants have ranged from $5,000 to $35,000, depending upon the quality of the studio and the number of hours involved. For residencies, there have been grants between $14,000 and $30,000 in FY19 and FY20. All right. Okay, so another question about residencies. Must the residency take place in an established venue or program? I would like to apply for a residency, which would be in its inaugural year in 2022. All right, well, that's an interesting question. So I think it might be a little risky, but you could certainly apply for it. The point you must make is that one of you should have a lot of experience at doing residencies. If someone is just starting inaugural year in 2022, they will have less experience hosting residencies. And therefore, I hope that the company or the ensemble going there has a lot of experience that can make up for that. As well, you should make sure that the activities can take place. In other words, has the space actually been given certification to open and conduct programs? If it has not yet received that kind of certification, occupancy certification, then I think that's, again, a problem. You may want to wait another year until everything is in place, because you must do the residency within the contract period. So it must take place for our FY22 applications within calendar 2022. The next question is about, I don't see a dollar cap on requests for residencies. Should we simply enter our budget and NYSCA will make the determination? Well, I think you can indicate within your budget, because you supply your own budget here, the sources of income that you're expecting, as well as the expenditures, and then the differential, which you might be approaching NYSCA as your request amount for. And as I said before, we really don't know at this stage with the expansion of the category to all performing arts, what the grant levels will be, but that's why I gave examples of what happened previously in the dance program. Hopefully it'll give you some guideposts, but we can't obviously guarantee anything with everything sort of shifting in that category. Rehearsal studio space is for applying organizations to offer out to outside artists. Yes, absolutely. You already have access to your own space. So what we really want to do is have you open up your space to other artists who are in desperate need to find affordable time in a rehearsal studio to create their work. Okay, and you're right. It's also, the person asked, not for applying artists or organizations to use the fund to rent an outside space. It is not for that purpose, no. It's for the organization that will be offering hours at an affordable rate to outside artists.
So the next question, how many apprentices can we have for the folk art opportunity? So you may be joining us a little late, but the master artist can only have one grant, but the group, the actual sponsoring group, can sponsor several apprenticeships. And so as an organization, you can sponsor multiple apprenticeships, but the master artist that you're working with can only receive one grant.
Do we have to know what artists we are offering residency to prior to the application? And again, it's not the residency host that is applying in this category. It is in fact the performing arts entity. So yes, the performing arts entity is the one applying, and we'll have to know where they're going, the location, and the dates that they're planning to be doing the residency in New York State. So the host would definitely have to work out a partnership and arrangements prior to the application deadline so that all that material can appear in the application, and also that you could submit, the artist can submit a letter of agreement for what's being provided by the artist and what's being expected of the host. I think we've covered all the questions at this stage.
Yeah,
Yes, Cabby?
It's concluded. Does anyone have any last minute questions? All right.
Hopefully we've been able to address all the questions and issues that you wanted to raise with these three opportunities. We're very happy to be able to present this information to you. And I think we go to, oh, wait, do we have some more?
One more.
One more. Okay. For residencies, will digital aspects be eligible to be supported? Well, it can certainly form part of what your residency is about, but there should still be live performance activity involved in the residency. But for instance, if you are bringing in a digital artist, you could bring them up to the residency. They can be involved in the rehearsal period. They can be involved in the outreach activities, and they could certainly be involved in the live performances. So that is part of it. And underneath the budget, you should show the amount of money that is being put towards that component and what is being paid to the outside artist that's doing the digital work for you.
And will the recordings be made available? Yes, and so they will be made available soon. Just stay tuned and keep sort of looking back to arts.ny.gov, and they will be available very soon. Okay, I don't think we have any further questions. So again, the guidelines are posted at arts.ny.gov. So all information is there, and actually we have a great front page, and so it will guide you directly to the guidelines and to specific areas, to specific opportunities that are available right now, and all the deadlines.
And as Kavi mentioned, make sure that you access that application manual. That's really, really helpful and valuable to look at, and set out the sort of steps that you need to take to move forward. Also, there'll be, I think Megan's going to tell us a little bit more about some of the upcoming webinars. Megan?
I sure will. Thank you so much, Debbie and Kavi. And that pretty much concludes today's webinar. I would like to remind you that this particular webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the NYSCA website along with the presentation deck. We'll send an email around with a link when it's live and ready to go. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. It's wonderful to share this virtual space with you. We hope that today's presentation was enlightening. Tomorrow's webinar on the FY2022 Support for Organizations grants will begin at 11 a.m. and you can still sign up. More information and registration links can be found on the NYSCA FY2022 webinar page. And in addition to this week's webinars, we will be hosting 4 optional virtual office hour sessions with our NYSCA staff on Friday, July 16th. You can sign up for these on our website as well. As a reminder, you can always reach the NYSCA staff directly during work hours in addition to virtual office hours. We'll be adding more virtual office hour sessions during the application period, so please stay tuned. We're thrilled to be ushering in this new era of NYSCA funding with you. Thank you all so very much and have a wonderful day. Thank you for attending.